Phuc never imagined he would end up living in an abandoned karaoke parlor in Sóc Trăng. At 23, he was a restless man from a small Mekong Delta village, working in metal fabrication. His skill set involved glasswork and light construction, crafting window frames, partitions, and shopfronts for a local company. When the company secured a large contract to renovate an old shopping center in Sóc Trăng, the supervisor arranged temporary lodging for the assigned team. "We've got an odd place for you," joked Mr. Nan, the boss. "A defunct karaoke building with spare rooms in the back." Phuc and his colleagues laughed at first, picturing neon lights and disco setups. But they discovered it was anything but glamorous. The building's front had once been a popular karaoke spot, now closed for years. The landlord turned part of it into cheap guest rooms, especially for construction workers or laborers passing through. Phuc arrived on a gray afternoon, the sky threatening rain. A battered sign reading "Happy Song Karaoke" hung crookedly above the entrance. Windows were boarded up, paint flaked off in large patches, and a musty smell lingered even from outside. He met Ton, the caretaker, a middle-aged woman who lived in a small annex out front. She handed over a single key to room 01 and said the rest of the building was mostly empty. "We rarely get visitors," she explained, eyes darting. "But for your team, it's cheap. If you stay a month or two, we'll discount the rent." Phuc forced a polite smile, ignoring the uneasy sense that she was withholding details. Inside the once lively karaoke hall, corridors branched off to small private singing rooms. Near the rear exit, a row of 8 rooms had been converted into makeshift lodging, each with a bed or two, a table and a fan. Phuc's company had arranged for 4 of them. Phuc and 2 close co-workers, Vu and Min, were to share room 01, while other workers took adjacent rooms. The air smelled stale, tinted with old perfume. Phuc tossed his bag on a dusty mattress, mentally resigned to endure these conditions. After all, it was only for the project's duration. He had no clue that behind the peeling wallpaper and eerie hush lurked a presence that would soon terrorize them. The first evening, after a grueling day installing metal frames at the job site, Phuc and his teammates returned to room 01. Inside the building, the corridor's dim overhead bulbs cast long shadows on the scratched linoleum. Occasional water stains marred the ceiling, remnants of neglected maintenance. Phuc's colleagues teased about ghosts. "Heard karaoke joints are perfect for midnight hauntings," Min joked, though there was genuine unease behind his grin. Vu responded with bravado, "I'm more afraid of rats." They laughed, but something about the hush felt unnerving. As they prepared to sleep, Phuc noticed the room had minimal furnishings, 2 battered metal bed frames with thin foam mats. A single rickety table stood beneath a flickering fluorescent light. The small attached bathroom had mosaic tiles chipped away, and an old mirror hung crookedly above the sink. They ate a quick dinner from styrofoam containers, then sprawled on the beds, chatting about their hometowns. When midnight approached, Vu switched off the main light, leaving only the glow from the corridor creeping through the door's dusty glass pane. Exhaustion overcame them. In the darkness, the building's silence felt unnatural. Each shift on the mattress squeaked loudly, echoing. Phuc eventually dozed, only to awaken around 2 a.m., uncertain why. He heard a faint tap-tap from the corridor outside. Possibly the caretaker? He listened for a minute, but the tapping ceased. Shrugging it off, he drifted back to uneasy sleep, ignorant that a restless occupant in the building might be stirring. Next day, work proved hectic. The crew needed to mount large panels of glass at the shopping center. Vu handled rigging, Min sealed edges, and Phuc managed measurements. By evening, they were exhausted. They returned to the karaoke building, noticing a faint rancid smell near the back corridor, possibly rotten trash from the neglected storerooms. They ignored it, focusing on rest. After a modest meal, they discovered the caretaker, Ton, wasn't around. A note pinned on her door said she'd be out visiting relatives. The men shrugged, returning to room 01. They chatted about the next day's tasks, eventually turning off the lights by 11 p.m. Shortly before midnight, Min woke up in a sweat. He propped on an elbow, blinking at the gloom. Phuc and Vu snored quietly. Then an unexpected sound, like soft humming of a female voice, reached his ears. The notes wove through the corridor, gentle yet disquieting. Min's skin prickled. Could it be the caretaker? But the voice sounded younger. He tiptoed to the door, opened it a crack. The corridor was dim, overhead bulbs flickering. The voice seemed to float from deeper within the old karaoke rooms. He followed it, heart pounding. As he approached the row of private karaoke booths, long abandoned, he glimpsed a flash of pink drifting past a corner. The humming grew faint, receding into the shadows. A wave of dread hit Min. Eager to see if a real person was there, he mustered nerve, advanced carefully. Rounding the corner, he found only an empty corridor with a locked door at the end. The humming had vanished. A single broken microphone lay on the floor, a relic of the building's past. Min swallowed thickly, returning to room 01 unsettled. Should he alert the others? He decided to say nothing, worried they'd mock him. But inside, anxiety churned. The next evening, Vu reported an odd occurrence to Phuc. While brushing his teeth in the communal sink near the back, he glimpsed a fleeting figure in the mirror. "She wore pink," he said in a hushed tone. I turned around. Nobody was there. Initially, Phuc joked, "Maybe you're daydreaming." But remembering how Min had looked spooked the day before, Phuc suspected something more. Their daily routine continued, working at the job site until late. But each night, the building's atmosphere felt heavier, as though the walls themselves watched them. The caretaker remained mostly absent, occasionally leaving notes about chores. One particularly exhausting night, the men decided on a small drink to unwind. They sat on the floor, sipping cheap beer and cracking jokes about the building's history. "You think any scandal happened here?" Min prodded. Karaoke places sometimes had shady dealings. Vu shrugged. Phuc teased them both, calling them superstitious. Yet inwardly, he admitted an eerie vibe. Around 11 p.m., they parted for bed. The overhead corridor light flickered ominously as if about to die. In the darkness of room 01, Phuc awakened later to an urgent whisper. "Phuc, are you up?" It was Min, voice trembling. I saw her again. Phuc sat upright, adrenaline spiking. Min described hearing footsteps in the corridor. Peeking out, he'd glimpsed a woman with long black hair, wearing a pink ao dye, traditional Vietnamese dress, drifting toward the old karaoke stage area. She vanished into the gloom. Though rattled, Phuc resolved to see for himself if this presence was real or a shared hallucination. He led the others into the corridor, phones in hand for light. The space was empty, the shuttered karaoke booth silent. A stale smell lingered, and the walls seemed to exhale an ancient sadness. No woman. They returned to bed, tension high. But none of them guessed how personal her hauntings would soon become. Word traveled among the other workers. 2 colleagues in room 02 said they too heard a female humming at night. One even glimpsed a shadow in pink crossing the hallway. The caretaker, Ton, shrugged off inquiries, denying any knowledge of spirits. "I've lived here months, never saw anything," she insisted, though her eyes darted nervously. An older coworker, Uncle Un, recounted local gossip. The building once boomed as a karaoke hotspot, employing multiple hostesses. One hostess, Lon, had supposedly died under mysterious circumstances. Some whispered it was a jilted lover's revenge, others said heartbreak drove her to suicide. The pink ao dye might have been her stage attire. If her spirit remained anchored, it might be restless or vengeful. Phuc found the tale unnervingly plausible. The odd occurrences, glimpses of pink, and humming all matched. He urged the caretaker to provide more clarity. She repeated her stance. "I know nothing. The building was closed for years. Don't believe such talk." But her evasive manner only stoked suspicion. In the ensuing nights, the sightings escalated. Some men woke to see pink fabric fluttering at the corridor's far end. Others felt cold hands brushing their shoulders in the darkness. Tools occasionally shifted or toppled without explanation. The workers' morale plummeted. A few threatened to relocate. But lodging in Sóc Trăng was scarce and expensive. One Sunday, a small group ventured inside the building's hidden storerooms, searching for any sign of the hostess's history. They found old furniture, boxes of leftover karaoke equipment, and a stack of photos. Among them, a publicity photo of a young woman in a pink ao dye, identified by a scribbled label as Lon. The men stared at the face, hair rising on their necks. This was the very face glimpsed in Reflections. They replaced the photo hurriedly, uneasy about stirring deeper curses. Despite the supernatural tension, the job site's demands forced everyone to stay. The second month of work arrived, with a push to finish the project on schedule. Over that period, Phuc and his 2 roommates noticed a shift in Vu's demeanor. He grew withdrawn, sometimes skipping dinner, returning late from wandering the corridors alone. Phuc pressed him, "Where do you go? Are you okay?" Vu's eyes would glaze over, mumbled excuses. The once jovial co-worker now displayed restlessness and gloom. Meanwhile, the sightings of the Pink Lady lessened for others. Strangely, it was as though her attention fixated on Vu. One night, near midnight, Phuc heard a dull thud from the next bed. He flicked on a phone flashlight, discovering Vu lying on the floor, eyes half open, mumbling inaudible words. Min woke too, alarmed. They tried shaking Vu awake. He bolted upright, blinking, confusion etched on his face. She needed me," he muttered, voice trembling. "I saw her, so lonely, she said she wants me to stay." Chills exploded in Phuc's chest. This echoed the stories of victims enthralled by a ghostly seduction. The Pink Lady's sorrowful spirit might have singled Vu out. The next morning, Vu complained of vivid dreams featuring the lady in pink, beckoning him into the old karaoke booth, whispering about never leaving. He claimed the dreams felt intimate, almost romantic. Phuc and Min exchanged worried glances. They recognized the danger. The spirit might be trying to claim a living soul. They urged Vu to move rooms or even relocate. But he refused. "I can't leave her," he insisted, eyes distant. The caretaker's denial continued, yet the men suspected she knew more. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew noticed Vu's deteriorating condition. He ate little, eyes rimmed with dark circles, haunted by unseen visions. One co-worker even spotted Vu sitting alone in a closed karaoke booth, apparently talking to empty air. As Vu's entanglement deepened, the nightly disruption soared. Doors rattled in the corridors. Ephemeral singing drifted through the building. Some men reported hearing a woman sobbing in the abandoned lounge. Equipment inexplicably vanished or reappeared in odd spots. The group's nerves frayed. Phuc reached a breaking point when, late one evening, he awakened to find Vu missing from bed again. Heart pounding, he grabbed a flashlight and tiptoed into the corridor. Low moans emanated from a disused karaoke booth at the building's far end. Steeling himself, Phuc inched closer. Inside the booth, the overhead disco light, somehow powered, cast swirling colors on battered furniture. In that surreal illumination, Vu stood with arms outstretched, facing a corner. A woman in a pink AO dye pressed close to him, half her form intangible in the disco lights. Her hair concealed her face, but Phuc sensed an intense presence. Vu's posture was rigid, lips parted in a silent gasp, as though losing consciousness. Phuc gasped, stepping backward. The woman's head twisted unnaturally, focusing on him with empty black eyes. She hissed, voice layered with heartbreak and fury. Vu collapsed to his knees, body trembling. Fear hammered Phuc's mind. This was no dream. Summoning courage, he lunged for Vu, yanking him backward. The Pink Lady let out a wail that shook the booth's dusty walls. Lights flickered. Phuc felt ice-cold air swirl. He half-carried Vu into the corridor, slammed the booth door shut. The moan inside subsided to an eerie hush. Vu lay limp in Phuc's arms, pulse fluttering. With Min's help, he arrived moments later. They dragged Vu to room 01. As dawn broke, they tended to his feverish condition. The building's haunting reached terrifying clarity. The Pink Lady ghost had physically manifested, targeting Vu for reasons unknown, perhaps longing, envy, or tragedy. Gripped by panic, Phuc insisted they contact the caretaker, Tan, for answers. She finally admitted that a hostess named Lan had died there, wearing her pink AO dye. Rumor said she'd fallen in love with a married client who abandoned her. Heartbroken, she took her own life in one of the private rooms. Since then, occasional sightings haunted the place. Some previous tenants left abruptly. She never spoke up, fearing losing tenants and income. Hearing this, Phuc and Min erupted with frustration. "You should have warned us," they spat. She shrugged helplessly, shame shadowing her face. What would it change? "I must keep renting," she said, tears flicking. Vu, delirious, kept murmuring Lan's name, claiming she wants me to be hers. The caretaker recommended a local Fae spiritual mediator might help. She gave them directions to a modest shrine near the outskirts of Sóc Trăng. Phuc and Min quickly arranged for the shrine's caretaker, Master Kwong, to come that same evening. The plan: hold a ritual in the old karaoke booth where Lon died, to appease or banish her ghost. Meanwhile, Vu wavered between mania and exhaustion. He sometimes babbled about needing to buy an offering for Lon, some trao caw or a pink scarf. The caretaker strongly discouraged it, insisting such offerings could deepen the ghost's attachment. But as dusk fell, Vu slipped away from the group, returning with a bag of items, pink fabric and fruit. He said he had to present them to Lon, so she wouldn't punish him. Panicked, Phuc tried to intervene, but Vu was single-minded, possessed by longing or fear. The caretaker realized in horror that such an offering might bind Vu to the ghost forever. They had to stop the ritual from turning into a ghostly marriage or vow. Around midnight, Master Kwong arrived, a lean stoic man wearing a simple dark tunic. He brought a small wooden box of ritual implements, incense, talismans, a short sword etched with protective symbols. The caretaker, Tan, led everyone to the corridor outside the booth where Lon had died. The air hung thick with tension. Vu, pale and glassy-eyed, clutched the pink fabric in trembling hands, as though entranced. Phuc and Min flanked him, determined not to let him wander. Master Kwong set up a low table with bowls of water, salt, and rice, plus a flickering candle. He began chanting in a low monotone, summoning benevolent spirits to calm the restless ghost. A sudden chill blanketed the corridor. The overhead bulbs dimmed, leaving the candle's weak glow. Master Kwong commanded them to remain quiet. Then from inside the booth, a soft humming drifted. It rose in volume, turning into a mournful melody. Lan's presence thickened, pressing on their chests like a vice. Vu jerked, eyes rolling back, stumbling toward the booth door. Phuc and Min clung to him, trying to hold him. The caretaker shrank behind them, fear etched in her face. The humming cut off abruptly, replaced by a hiss, then a trembling voice in the gloom, "He is mine." A swirl of cold wind rushed out from the booth. The door slammed open. Within, the karaoke stage lights flickered to life, pink and purple beams dancing on dusty walls. In that kaleidoscope, a silhouette wearing a pink AO dye glided forward. Her face, half obscured by long black hair, turned to them, eyes brimming with unearthly sorrow. Master Kwong lifted his short sword, chanting louder. The ghost raised an arm, pointing directly at Vu, who collapsed to his knees. She advanced, her figure shifting in and out of visibility. "Don't take him," Phuc cried, voice cracking. The ghost's presence manifested in a swirl of swirling dust and cold air. Master Kwong stepped between Lon and Vu, brandishing the sword etched with symbols. He spoke a forceful chant in Sino-Vietnamese, commanding the spirit to release its hold on the living. Lon shrieked, an ear-splitting wail that battered the corridor. The caretaker whimpered, covering her ears. The overhead lights flickered spastically. A rancid odor, like decaying flowers, choked the air. The ghost lunged at Master Kwong, intangible arms slicing through the candle flame. Vu groaned, fighting the invisible compulsion dragging him toward the booth. Phuc and Min wrestled him back, tears on their cheeks from dread. The pink lady's face contorted, her lips peeling into a tragic grin, as if longing and rage combined. Master Kwong pressed the short sword forward, reciting a final incantation. He flung salt and rice grains at the spirit. The grains sparkled under flickering neon lights. Lon recoiled, letting out a second, more anguished screech. The entire building vibrated as if an earthquake struck. Then the pink lights inside the booth died, plunging the corridor into near darkness. Zilengse. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Vu slumped in Phuc's arms, eyes dazed. The ghost's silhouette lingered faintly, edges dissolving. She let out a whisper, "I just wanted him to stay." Then her form burst into dissipating wisps of pinkish haze, vanishing with one final sigh. Master Kwang stark gerät, panting. The caretaker sobbed, face pale as chalk. Phuc and Min clutched Vu, who seemed half unconscious. The corridor reeked of fear and stale perfume. The sense of an unholy presence receded, leaving a hollow echo. They carried Vu back to room 01. Master Kwong performed a quick cleansing, sprinkling water infused with special herbs. Gradually, Vu's breathing eased, color returning to his face. He blinked, disoriented. What happened?" he mumbled. Over the next hours, they explained the final confrontation. Vu stared at the pink fabric he'd once offered, now soaked in salt water. Shame and confusion clouded his gaze. "It felt like she was pulling me," he confessed, voice trembling. "I heard her crying, saying she was alone." Master Kwong gently told them to discard the fabric and any items connected to the ghost. He recommended a small offering to local temples for Lan's soul. She was no demon initially, only a spirit twisted by sorrow. Provide prayers for her peace. At dawn, the group, exhausted, tidied the corridor, disposing of broken objects. The caretaker finally admitted her knowledge of Lan's suicide. She'd never expected it to escalate so violently. Apologies abounded, but the men simply wanted to leave. The job was nearly complete. They agreed to power through the final tasks, then find new housing. None wanted to remain in a building soaked with tragedy. Vu recuperated swiftly once Lan was banished. He recalled bits of her illusions, an old karaoke stage, half illusions of romantic dinners, twisted by heartbreak. Over the next few days, no more nightly apparitions occurred. The corridor remained still, the old booth silent. By the end of the month, the project concluded. The men packed their belongings. Another contractor would handle final touches at the job site. Phuc, Vu, and Min were ready to depart. The caretaker accepted their rent with subdued relief. She admitted she might soon close the entire building, as it was unprofitable and rumored to be haunted. On their last morning, they gathered by the building's entrance. A slight drizzle fell. The caretaker, Tan, gave them a reluctant farewell, half apologizing for the ordeal. They politely accepted, anxious to leave. Phuc's motorbike revved up as he strapped on his helmet. He glanced back at the old sign reading Happy Song Karaoke, paint flaking away. The corridor behind it looked shadowy, a resting shell of a once lively spot. In his mind, Phuc pictured the Pink Lady Ghost's final, anguished look, and an unexpected pang of pity rose. She had been a lonely soul, stuck in bitterness and heartbreak. They rode out, heading toward the main road. Vu remained quiet throughout the journey, likely processing his brush with the supernatural. Min tried to lighten the mood by joking about better lodging next time. But no one laughed wholeheartedly. The memory of the pink woman's sorrowful hum lingered in the damp air. In the months after, whenever Phuc recounted the tale, he would emphasize how empathy and sorrow can twist a spirit, tethering it to old haunts. The pink ghost had sought companionship, a restitution for a broken heart that led to a tragic end. That misguided longing nearly claimed Vu. Only the combined efforts of the men, and the spiritual incantations, prevented further tragedy. So ended their harrowing time in a dilapidated karaoke building in Sóc Trăng. The final rumor was that the caretaker eventually demolished the interior, turning it into a simple storehouse. Whether Lan's spirit finally found rest, none of the men knew. They only prayed she discovered the peace she lacked in life. For them, the memory would be enough to haunt their dreams for years to come. The faint hum of a tune, a flash of pink passing the corridor, and the chilling knowledge that some ghosts linger not out of malice, but out of heartbreak unresolved.